Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and really just distill the most surprising and essential insights. Today, we're diving deep into the inner workings of the highly curious mind. We're going to be focusing on the habits and quirks that make you, you.
Yeah, the stack of articles you sent over is just fascinating. It details 10 seemingly strange habits, things that are often criticized.
Like what?
Well, everything from chronic messiness to a tendency to withdraw socially.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is that psychological research links these directly to high levels of cognitive ability.
So our mission today is to basically give some scientific validation for your personal quirks.
Uh-huh.
We're going to stop seeing these as flaws and start seeing them for what they might be: sophisticated high-level processing strategies.
Got it.
So if people call you messy or antisocial or sarcastic, we're here to explain why your brain might actually be, optimizing its own performance.
And what's so fascinating here is understanding the why. A lot of these behaviors that get labeled as bad habits are actually highly efficient, strategic ways that a really active brain manages huge amounts of data.
And it's optimizing its energy.
Right, it's limited energy and resources. We're going to unpack the science behind why choosing solitude or constantly running simulations in your head might just mean you're intellectually independent.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we should start by looking at how intelligent individuals manage their external world, so their environment and their social battery, to maximize their internal processing power.
Mm.
Let's begin with the social realm. We all know someone who finds large parties, completely draining. They'd much rather have a quiet evening alone.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sources suggests this isn't antisocial. It's actually a high IQ requirement.
That's spot on. And the explanation really centers on cognitive load. I mean, the intelligent brain is just constantly processing complex information. It's seeing connections, running simulations, even when you're not consciously trying.
Okay, so then you throw a party into the mix.
Right. You introduce a social setting, a party, a networking event, and suddenly that brain has to allocate a huge amount of energy to reading expressions, interpreting tone, tracking multiple conversations at once.
All those social protocols. So the active mind finds this overload just exhausting because it's diverting energy from its main job.
It's priority tasks, exactly, analysis and connection making. For a highly active brain, making small talk can require the same mental energy as solving a complex equation.
Wow.
So choosing solitude is a strategic choice. It's about optimizing your neural networks. When you're alone, you activate what's called the default mode network, or DMN.
Okay, what's that?
That's your brain's background processor. It's where your mind wanders, consolidates memories, makes these really deep connections between different experiences, and generates those aha breakthroughs.
The famous shower moment phenomenon.
That's it, exactly.
The brain finally gives up trying to force a solution, and then, boom, the answer just appears.
Precisely. Solitude feeds the DMN. And research shows that people with higher IQs actually report being genuinely happier spending time alone versus constantly socializing.
So they're not just relaxing, they're using that time.
For reflection, for planning, for creative thinking. Choosing a documentary over a dance floor isn't self-punishment. It's recognizing that the brain performs best when it's managing internal inputs, not just constantly reacting to external ones.
That need for internal processing, it often translates directly into how we manage our physical space, right?
Sure.
Which leads us to our next point: the creative chaos of a messy desk.
Oh, yes.
One of the sources totally challenges that idea of a tidy space equals a tidy mind.
And it turns out that old saying, a messy desk is the sign of a genius, actually has some real psychological backing. We're talking about organized chaos, a disorder that's really just there to serve the thinking process.
There was that University of Minnesota study on this, right?
Yes, that research is key. They found that people working in messy environments generated a statistically higher number of more creative and innovative ideas than people in tidy spaces.
Can you give us a little more on that? What was the setup?
Sure. So in the experiment, they gave participants tasks like brainstorming new uses for ping pong balls. The messy room had paper strewn around, pens scattered. It was generally chaotic.
And the tidy room?
Pristine, organized, and the people in the messy room came up with ideas that were way more outside the box. It showed much greater divergent thinking.
So the clutter is just a reflection of the brain prioritizing the flow state over, the micromanagement of tidying up.
Exactly. If I'm in the middle of a thought, my brain isn't going to waste energy putting a pen away. When an intelligent and creative mind is in the zone, it's operating on a high-speed track.
The mental resources are all going to ideas and connections, not filing.
Exactly. The mess is just an external sign of an internally focused mind. If your desk looks like a hurricane hit it, it might just mean your brain is busy solving the problems that are laid out on that desk.
And that need for efficiency and depth, it just carries right over into social interaction again. Which brings us to another source that asks, why does basic small talk, like how's the weather,
Hmm.
feel like intellectual torture?
Ah, yes. It's because the high-functioning brain needs complex, meaningful exchanges to really activate. Small talk feels like a cognitive drain, not a connection.
The source used a great analogy for this.
It did. It said engaging in superficial conversation is like using a high-performance sports car, a Ferrari, to deliver a single pizza.
I love that.
It's technically possible, but it's an enormous waste of a high-performance engine.
And it's fuel. It immediately explains that feeling of, energy cost.
And there's an opportunity cost, too. Every minute you spend talking about traffic is a minute you're not exploring a challenging idea or connecting two different concepts. Highly intelligent people crave that intellectual sparring.
So if you're trapped, what do?
You redirect. You actively pivot the conversation to something with more depth. Instead of, how was your weekend? You could try asking, what is the most challenging or interesting thing you learned this past week?
And you immediately satisfy the brain's need for substance.
And you bypass the cognitive cost of superficiality.
That craving for depth must also dictate the size of your social circle. That brings us to another source, on friend selectivity. Why just a small, tight group?
Again, it's all about a strategic investment of that very precious cognitive energy. Intelligent people tend to choose quality over quantity.
Right.
I mean, maintaining relationships, especially surface-level ones, requires a lot of cognitive overhead. Remembering details, managing expectations.
So they're not bad at making friends, they're just really selective about how they spend their social battery.
Exactly. They invest deeply in a select few, people who genuinely challenge their thinking or share complex interests. This isn't isolation, it's optimization. They're happier with fewer, but far more substantial friendships.
Okay, let's pivot and look inward at the cognitive engine itself. Those habits that might look like indecision or distraction, but are actually high-level processing. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the overthinking club. One source argues that overthinking is actually advanced brain processing.
It absolutely is. I mean, overthinking at its best is just running high-fidelity mental simulations. While someone else might rely on a gut feeling, the overthinker is digging deep.
So they're considering all the variables.
All the variables, calculating second, third-order effects, predicting numerous outcomes before they make a move.
But hold on, if overthinking leads to decision fatigue, isn't that inefficient? Where's the line between advanced processing and just being paralyzed by choice?
That's the critical distinction. It becomes inefficient when the analysis paralyzes action, sure, but the mechanism driving it is high-level processing. Neuroscience actually confirms this. Overthinkers tend to have a hyperactive prefrontal cortex.
The brain's executive function center.
Right. It's responsible for planning, complex simulation, impulse control, all the heavy lifting, so it's constantly using up glucose brain fuel to run these high-intensity simulations.
Which is why, at the end of the day, you can't decide what to watch on Netflix.
Precisely. That's the decision fatigue. But the huge upside, which the research points out, is superior learning from failure. Overthinkers learn better from mistakes because they meticulously analyze exactly what went wrong. They turn every slip-up into future programming.
So they're not indecisive, they're just thorough.
They're thorough and trying to preemptively manage risk.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, now let's talk about distraction. What about the active daydreamer? You're in a boring but mandatory meeting and your mind is suddenly off planning a trip to Mars. Is that a lack of focus?
On the surface, yeah, it looks like it. But the brain is just refusing to waste processing power on mundane tasks. The source argues this mind wandering is actually productive. When a task is too simple, the brain activates the DMN again.
The default mode network, right, so it's not the off switch.
No, it's the background processing switch. The brain isn't sleeping, it's just delegating its attention to more cognitively demanding projects. It's making memory connections, generating ideas, solving background problems.
You mentioned Einstein and J.K. Rowling. It seems like those breakthroughs always happen when you stop forcing the issue.
It really does. It speaks volumes about the brain's need for that background time. Daydreamers specifically are great at insight problems, those puzzles where the solution comes from a sudden aha moment, not linear logic.
Because their wandering mind is running all these simulations in the background.
Exactly. It's testing scenarios and preparing the brain for that sudden, glorious breakthrough. It's not distraction, it's distributed processing.
This level of active processing, it must require constant input, which leads us to the curious mind and the 3 a.m. Wikipedia rabbit hole addiction.
Yeah.
Is that just information hoarding?
It's so much more important than that. It's intelligence fuel. Curiosity fundamentally changes how the brain learns. When you're curious, your brain releases dopamine.
The reward chemical.
Right, which doesn't just feel good. It chemically primes your brain to absorb and retain information better.
So that little dopamine hit you get when you start the search actually reinforces the learning itself.
Absolutely. Scientists have found that curious individuals have much more active hippocampus regions. That's the primary center for memory formation. So following those spirals strengthens your learning capacity because you're using that dopamine boost to lock in new info.
So those late-night deep dives aren't procrastination. They're actually a form of brain training.
They enhance learning capacity through what's called divergent thinking, seeing connections between unrelated fields. And this connects perfectly to our next point. Pattern detection. A highly active, curious brain has to, by definition, notice weird patterns everywhere.
Okay, so how does that translate into superior pattern recognition?
Well, pattern recognition is one of the strongest indicators of advanced cognitive ability. Your brain is working overtime connecting dots and analyzing sequences that are just too subtle for most people to even notice.
It's trying to make sense of all the data it's absorbing.
Exactly. The advanced neural networks are constantly looking for organizational frameworks for underlying systems. It's not paranoia, you're just processing at a higher fidelity. You're seeing the matrix while everyone else is just seeing the screen.
That's a great way to put it.
So if you're always the one identifying anomalies or predicting trends or seeing logical holes in arguments that others miss, it's not a flaw. It's just your brain working harder to piece the world together into a cohesive structure.
Let's pivot now to the final piece. How these internal quirks show up in communication, specifically humor and sarcasm. One source highlights the power of the sarcasm flex. Why is being sarcastic a sign of intelligence?
Because it requires incredible cognitive flexibility. We call it serious mental gymnastics. Your brain has to perform 3 operations almost instantly.
Okay, what are they?
First, you understand the literal meaning of the words. Second, you flip that meaning to its exact opposite. And third, you have to read the social context and cues to make sure the comment actually lands properly.
That is intellectual multitasking. It's linguistic dexterity and high social cognition, all in a split second.
It is, and research from places like Harvard and Columbia shows that people who frequently use or understand sarcasm tend to score higher on creativity tests. It literally forces the brain into multi-layer thinking, which builds cognitive pathways that help with problem solving everywhere else.
So it's not just being rude, it's a high-level cognitive flex.
Exactly.
Okay, our final habit, laughing at your own joke, even when no one else is, that awkward moment when you're the only one chuckling 5 minutes later.
That awkward moment is actually a powerful indicator of intellectual independence. It suggests 2 things. First, strong self-confidence. You don't need external validation for your humor. You trust your own perspective.
And the second thing.
A unique or abstract perspective. You're seeing layers of irony or connection that just flew right over everyone else's heads. You're laughing 5 minutes later because your brain just made a new, non-obvious connection to the punchline.
So you're maintaining your own judgment despite the social pressure to, wait for the group laugh track.
Absolutely. Cognitive psychology confirms that people who can maintain their judgment despite social pressure often score higher on measures of intellectual independence. And the ability to laugh at yourself is a strong sign of emotional intelligence and resilience. You're not socially awkward, you're just operating on a unique frequency.
We started with 10 seemingly odd habits. The chaotic desk, the need for solitude, the overthinking, and what we've discovered is that they're not flaws at all.
Not at all.
They are demonstrably the strategic output of a highly efficient, high-performance cognitive system that's just running constantly in the background.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't just random personality traits. They are the individual's strategic way of managing a huge volume of complex data. The brain prioritizes what it deems essential, deep analysis, problem-solving, efficient energy use, even if that looks like a messy desk to the outside world.
So what does this all mean for you?
I think it means validation and maybe a directive. Stop wasting energy fighting your natural inclinations if they're actually serving your higher processing functions. The evidence suggests that for many highly capable people, these quirks are features, not bugs.
Since curiosity is intelligence fuel, and solitude and messy desks are shown to boost both processing power and creativity, this raises an important question for you to think about after this deep dive. If these habits are markers of optimized processing, what specific weird habit could you intentionally start prioritizing or leaning into, be it daydreaming more or accepting the clutter, to help your own brain work harder and make those unexpected connections? We didn't really discuss intentionally cultivating these habits, but the evidence suggests it might be worthwhile to stop fighting your own inclinations and just fully embrace the chaos.